only is Ric Flair, I guess, an ambassador now more for AEW, he doesn't represent you anymore. You don't want him to. There's no more value in Ric Flair. No. And there's none of value, unfortunately, in a lot of wrestlers that insist on sticking around. And so we are going to talk about, before we jump into our SummerSlam predictions, we're going to talk about wrestlers who are the opposite of John Cena, didn't know when to go, don't know when to go, wrestling personalities that have overstayed their welcome. We all got a couple. Eddie, who comes to mind when I tell you a wrestler that didn't know when to bow out, a la John Cena?
Do we want to do all three or just one at a time?
Yeah, let's name your top three.
Okay, my first one is Kane, the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, mostly because he keeps saying terrible nonsense online, and it just makes me not really like him as a person. But prior to that, we used to talk about it on this show, that if mystery question mark person is Kane, just tell me.
Yeah, if the main event is Raw with a question mark silhouette, and the answer is Big Show, Mark Henry, or Kane, just tell me.
Just tell me.
It's not going to be a fun surprise.
Yeah, it's not a fun surprise.
Big Show, Mark Henry, Kane. If it's one of them, just tell me.
Just tell me. And that's how I feel about Kane, where it's like, obviously Glenn Jacobs hasn't been a part of the programming in a long time, but even before then, it was very much like
Corporate Kane ruined the character of Good Kane.
Yes,
it ruined it. It ruined it.
And him just kind of being around, I don't want to see him ever again because Corporate Kane was so bad.
Kane was one of those dilemmas. I don't know. I guess happy problem is what I'll call it, where that was supposed to be a 1 to 2 month thing.
Yeah.
The Undertaker's brother returns, costs him this match against Shawn Michaels. That's how we pivot The Undertaker to do something at WrestleMania because we didn't really have a match for him. So we're going to kind of create one out of thin air, create this awesome story. Your crazy deranged brother that you tried to burn alive, you left for dead, he's back, and you're going to wrestle him at WrestleMania. You're going to win, and that's going to be the end of it. And they liked Glenn Jacobs.
Yeah.
They've wanted an outlet for him for years between Isaac Yankem and Fake Diesel. They wanted an outlet for the performer for years. And they found one, and then they're like, you know what? This Kane thing might stick around, and then it lasted,
It was great for a long time.
He debuted in 97 and took off his mask in 03. And that would have been a great run in general. And then everything, because I loved, with a capital L, Kane. He was, for a while, with the mask on, my favorite wrestler.
He was so cool.
You and I talked about how, the invisible string theory, we were both at King of the Ring 2000.
I was rooting for him, too.
Years before we even knew each other. And it was like, I wanted him to win so bad, I can't describe it.
Yeah.
And so I loved him.
Him and Crash Holly.
But you're right. Unmasked Kane was Corporate Kane was awful. You were left for dead in a pile of ashes, and then, no, you weren't. You were just so psycho. You thought you were. Okay. And now you're like a lawyer?
Yeah,
when did
right.
Kane go to law school? You know what I mean? When did Kane go to ITT Heck?
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? And get a degree in anything. And it just, and what it does, you know what it is? It's How I Met Your Mother. It ended so poorly, it makes me not think of the good stuff as well.
I think that's really my point when it comes to Kane, is that everything now is so tainted from what came immediately before that I don't want to see him ever again. There is a very fun TikTok account, though, that holds him accountable for all of the things he did as the wrestler Kane.
Perfect.
But responding to...
Is Katie Vick involved in all of this?
Not all of them,
Okay.
but sometimes when he makes a comment about current affairs, there's an account that holds him accountable as the wrestler Kane, and it's delightful. So I highly recommend that. Chris Jericho is another one on my list. I think that Chris Jericho was great as the first AEW champion. I thought it was a very smart move. He was name recognition. People could get behind him between the rockin' wrestling boat that he did and his appearances in New Japan that helped spark All In and everything. I think he was a great initial ambassador. I think the problem is that much like AEW has kind of moved on from a lot of that original talent, it has spiritually moved on from Chris Jericho, but not physically moved on from Chris Jericho.
The problem with Jericho is he's one of like 5 guys that Tony Khan listens to.
And he's got
Yeah.
a grip on Khan. That's the
Yes.
biggest thing is that like so.
And it's apparent.
So one of the issues, and I don't want to make this about AEW, and especially since I seem to have nothing nice to say about AEW, and I don't want to be that guy. I
Yeah.
really don't.
You're turning into Eric Bischoff quickly.
And I really don't want
So-
to. I don't root against them. I'm just trying to be observant and honest. And the thing with Tony Khan, Jimmy's entirely right. Jericho got to him early and is like, I am, because what
Yes.
Tony Khan is, God bless him, is a geek fan with a ton of money. And so if you were a geek fan and Chris Jericho's like, I'm your best friend
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
now, you're a geek fan and Chris Jericho's your best friend, and now Chris Jericho, I just kind of feel like it's like this, like the whisperer in his ear, but also it's just
the
like
Grand Wizard of Oz.
and like a guy that just knows like, listen, the money here is not going to last forever, and I'm going to get as much of it as
Yes.
I can, and that's what Chris
Yeah.
Jericho's really actually doing.
He's a
here.
carny's carny.
He is,
Yeah.
and he is such like. You want to talk about how I think Cody Rhodes is disingenuous?
Oh, total
that
politician,
guy.
yeah.
Does no, there's no way that Chris Jericho respects Tony Khan personally.
No.
Because I'll tell you who doesn't: Maxwell Jacob Friedman. If you think that guy personally respects his boss,
No.
you're on another planet.
Yeah.
If you don't think that that guy went on TV trying to get fired that night, that's exactly what he was trying to do. To the point where he dropped an F-bomb, so like they would almost leave him no choice.
Yeah.
They don't respect Tony Khan. They just know that he's a paycheck and a goober. And if they play nice to him, he's probably a guy that doesn't have a lot of friends anyway, yet alone the people he sees on TV.
Yeah, right.
And I just think Jericho has got to
Yeah.
that. He's like a tick.
Yeah, and it's
Do you think? Can I just
Oh,
ask
yeah.
one question? Do you think Max really gets 15 a year? 15 million a year?
no.
That number seems absurd
That's
to me.
I do think he makes $1 more than Moxley.
I just think that if you're talking about $15 million a year, I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, is it? I know that this company is probably paying a lot personally, but I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a week to one person. I just,
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't think anybody in the. I'm not.
I do know, by the way, he has creative control.
I don't know if they have a $15 million roster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe they do. but
Moxley
I
at one
mean-
point was the highest paid at 6.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Then
So
you're going to pay that
that's
guy
gonna-
2.5. What you're paying John Moxley?
Yeah, that's
two
so,
and a half.
So that's the thing is I didn't know
I'm
what.
sorry, a side topic, but
No,
I have
no.
so many thoughts on MJ.
Yeah.
And I wanted
I
to.
think
I'm
it's-
shocked he resigned.
because
I am
there's
too.
a part of me that thinks that MJF could have legitimately gotten 15 million from Tony Khan because of what Tony Khan feels like MJF's value is.
And you know what, Jimmy, you're right, because what we're trying to do is be like, no way, no one's worth that. And it's like, again, we're talking about a geek with money who is
Yeah.
desperately now, because you want to talk about like comparing them to WCW. Like WCW created like maybe 5 real stars of their own: Goldberg, DDP, Booker T. Those are
Rey Mysterio.
Yeah, I guess you can give him credit for Rey Mysterio and like their version of Scott Steiner. You know what I
Sure,
mean?
yeah.
Right. But AEW is trying to do the same thing, where it's like it's Hangman Page and it's kind of Britt Baker, but they really, really wanted MJF to be one of those guys, and they desperately, desperately don't want to lose him. And maybe they overpaid him because they already have. They wanted to keep Jade Cargill.
Yeah.
They wanted to keep Jade Cargill, and they already lost her. And she kind of immediately went on TV and was
also
like, "This is
think-
better. This is better." And they don't want to do that every time with their people.
I also think that they have mentally lost John Moxley. I don't think he's much.
Oh yeah, he wanted nothing to do with that IWGP belt.
Yeah.
Well, I also just don't think AEW. I mean, like if you're
And Moxley, by the way, is somebody who I also believe that has Tony Khan's ear.
Well, if you're Moxley, right, and your best friends are like, brother, it's a whole new ball game here. It's such good shit. Guy is gone. Everything's different. Everything feels better and different. You're not walking back into Vince McMahon's Raw. You should come back. There's something here for you. And Moxley knows how much money he didn't make by doing a Shield thing last week. WrestleMania weekend. He knows that. He knows how much money is in a Shield reunion. And to WWE's credit, they refused to fake Diesel him and be like, remember when the Shield was Rollins and Reigns
We
and
brought back Chris Hero.
yeah, right, yeah, and it was Chris Hero all along, or like Chad Gable, and it's like nope, they haven't done it till they get all 3, and there's money to be made there.
Yeah.
Really
I'm
quick-
sorry I sidetracked
No,
you from the
Speaking
Jericho
of 3,
thing.
who is your third?
My third one is Jim Ross. And Jim Ross and Jericho, kind of like when I talked about earlier, and I talked about Peyton Manning and how like one day Peyton Manning just wasn't good at NFL football anymore, but didn't mean that he was bad at football. Jim Ross and Jericho are in the same boat for me, where it's your whole thing is AEW need to be your own identity. And it was great to have these guys in the beginning. It was great when Jim Ross was starting to do the Wrestle Kingdoms, when he would do the English broadcast, because we hadn't really heard Jim Ross prior to that. Hearing Jim Ross on AEW just feels wrong.
It's passed him by. What you know what his greatest strength was? Jim Ross's greatest strength was knowing the concept of the rivalry and then adding to it, right? Yeah. Whether it be like, one of my favorite calls ever, which is Hogan going up in the air on the Rock and the big leg and Jim Ross screaming, he beat Andre the Giant with that move. And like Jim Ross would narrate the intentions of the wrestlers, like when Triple H was at his the regime, the Hunter McMahon regime, like he would tell me why Triple H was doing this, and he no longer can watch a match and construct it and add and fill in those gaps. He's just sort of trying to remember everybody's name.
Yes.
So Jim Ross also made it personal. So he had personal connections to the guys more so in WWF.
Yeah.
In
he loved Steve Austin as his friend.
Right?
Yeah.
So that helped get Steve Austin over. Now it's like Jim Ross in AEW, he had a personal connection with Punk, with Moxley, because I know Moxley wanted JR on the call of his matches. So when Jim Ross has a personal connection with somebody, that's when he's at his best.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't have that with guys like...
And he's trying to figure out, he's
Swerve
on it.
Strickland, who is the star you should be.
No connection with him.
And you have no connection, and so your match calls feel flat.
And what JR used to be, too, is JR was not only the commentator, but he was a big, big part of creative, right? He was Vince McMahon's right-hand guy.
He knew the direction where Vince wanted to go.
He knew what we wanted you to be. So I know not only like who you are and who you're trying to be, I know how I'm supposed to present you.
Yes.
And he's not sharp enough or invested to that level where he can no longer, like I said, add to it. He just sort of watches, reacts, tries not to say something outdatedly sexist, remember your name, and move on.
Yeah.
And try to drop his high spots in there.
And get in slobber knockers if he can, and they still make sense.
Yeah.
JR's a great
So
pick.
those are them, again, because I think that all three of them are all-timers, without a question. And at no point do I think that, with the exception of Kane, I don't think that what they're doing currently is damaging their legacy. But I do think that it is time to move on. And for Jericho and Jim Ross's, respectively, AEW needs to move on from them.
You're totally right.
In order for AEW to evolve, because again, they were really, really important. I really needed you to start watching this show, and having names and voices and hearing things that you remember from WWE that you liked is important. But we have moved on.
And Jericho won that belt, and I agree with you. Great first champion.
Yeah.
People have heard of him. He can breed the next person. When we work the talent. Great quarterback. But now he's the FTW champion beating Hook. No, Hook beats you, man. You're 60, and he needs these
Unless
wins.
Hook is going to NXT in 3 months.
But then don't do the match.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? That's what I mean.
Agreed.
It's like Jericho holding the FTW title and going over people now. You're right. Just because a decision was good 5 years ago doesn't mean it has to be continued to date, as this guy is pushing 60 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that's an outstanding point.
Well, especially because, again, and I don't want to bash AEW, but I think that this is the turning point for them more specifically. Like, you needed these guys in the way that TNA needed Jeff Hardy and Sting and Kurt Angle.
But you got to fly on your own eventually.
But you have to eventually build Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels to have people be a part of it. You have those guys in AEW, but having these older relics still around and still prominently featured on your programming really...
And a guy that will be featured later on in the show when we talk about SummerSlam more. Don't disrupt what CM Punk did to that company.
Oh, he threw it into chaos.
Hangman Page will never be the same guy in that company. Darby Allin will never be the same guy in that company. Jungle Boy? That guy's career is over. That guy's career is over. You will be the guy that got choked out by CM Punk forever. They already give you... Your fans give him trouble for that in the crowd. And make that guy... like. CM Punk did so much more harm than good there that it is almost incalculable how much different, not better or worse, but just different they would be if he never came there at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, that's what I said when he first came, right? I was like, this is a bad choice because you're in this TNA era where you have the ability to morph into your own identity, but associating with CM Punk is going to stunt that growth.
But it was the right choice in that moment, and had they kept him special attraction,
Sure.
he would have been fine. I think.
Putting the title on
He's
him?
also a geek, though. He's also a geek. I mean, dude, you are at the end of your career. You failed at UFC.
This is what I came here for.
You failed at comic books. You failed at everything. You are not a fighter. You're not this guy. You are wrestler CM Punk, or you are nothing relevant at all. All you had to do was go to AEW, play nice, play along, put a couple guys over, get your championship, not decide that this was going to be an ego project for you, and I'm going to show you, like, just cash the check, guy. WWE, you had an opportunity to go from WWE and leaving not on your terms to going to their competitor, sticking it up their ass a little bit, having a nice year or two, making a lot of money, winning another belt, working with some kids, working with your friends, just having a nice run and end wrestling on your terms. And Phil Brooks is just incapable of being a decent human being. And don't tell me like, the recent reports say WWE's thrilled with him. Dude, this is the very, very, very last shot you will ever get at anything ever, 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 ever. And you've already let them down and got hurt. So yeah, you better not be a dick right now, man. You've been back for 7 months and wrestled twice, and this is your last shot. And you're trying to make me be like, wow, he isn't a huge raging jerk back there. Thanks, Punk. You know what I mean? Like, that guy. And I get that it's a disruptive place, but of course, CM Punk had to walk back there and be like, this is about me. This is about me. He looked at 5'8", 170-pound Jack Perry and was like, let's go. Let's do this. You're so cool, man. You're so tough. You're so cool. This is a glorified indie run by a nerd, and you had to make everything about you and you suck. Anyway, Jimmy,
I'm good. I'm going home now. I'm out. I got what I got.
There we go. We came for.
Well, then I'll go for my 3.
Yeah.
Jimmy's got. Jimmy, who do you got as 3 people? I'm sure CM Punk's not on the list, who have overstayed their welcome in this here.
Oh, that was great. That's the real reason I came here. I just like hearing you yell about CM Punk.
The guy, I mean, you want to talk
There it
about
is.
you?
See what I did?
I mean, are you kidding me? This would be like if Manny Ramirez was like,
Can you
what?
at least tell us that we're about to wrap up so all of our fans know that we have 2 more hours
Exa-
left?
Well, this is like if
2 more hours.
Well, can you imagine?
how it goes
can
on this
you-
show.
Well,
Oh,
can
boy.
you imagine if Manny Ramirez was like, I'm gonna join the Savannah Bananas, and you'll be like,
I'm
oh,
usually toes up by now.
and it's like,
Sure.
oh, that'll be fun, right? Manny Ramirez on the Savannah Bananas. That'll be a fun way for him to end his baseball career. And it's like, no, this is about me. And by the end of it, we will be the Savannah Ramirez's. And it's just like, guy, they're the Bananas. You know what I mean? And it's just like CM Punk went back there and looked again. And what a tough guy. Looked at Jack Perry and was like, you're the guy I'm going to fight. Whoa, dude, I'm so impressed.
Mr. Stewart,
We're still learning here, Jason.
Just like, that you beat up that 8th grader. I can't believe it.
or Chris. Are you Jason or Chris?
We're Chris on this
I'm
one.
sorry.
Jimmy,
apologies.
who do you got as 3 guys that have stuck around too long as we stick around way too long?
Big Show,
Sure.
Paul White, Shane McMahon,
Sure.
and Goldberg.
No, well, Goldberg's not a
And
bad
Goldberg
answer.
was not his fault, by the way.
Goldberg is not a bad
and
answer.
that's actually the one that I want to focus on, not because it creates a debate between us, because I actually think we agree with this.
Big Show, just really quick, the Big Show physically is, I mean, he's like
He just had double knee surgery.
lumbering
Yeah.
around. I mean, Irish whips look painful for this guy at this point. It's just way too long. And like you said, the thing about like the Big Show is, don't get me wrong, when you see him, if you go to a wrestling show, you'll never forget the first time you see him. The first time I ever saw the Big Show in person was the 2003 Royal Rumble, and I remember it was Brock Lesnar versus the Big Show. And I'll say this every time, it looked like a garage was fighting a house, right? Brock Lesnar versus the Big Show, okay? And the first time you see this guy in person, you're like, I've just never seen a guy that big. It's
Yeah, right.
amazing.
I was ringside in Worcester for Nitro when Kurt Hennig gave him the perfect plex.
Oh, amazing.
And I was on the corner, and it's the high five thing, and I'm in high school. His finger was no joke,
Right.
like the size of 2, and I'm 6'4" and 280 pounds, and I have pretty good sized fingers, but his one finger was the size of 2 of my fingers.
And the thing with him, like, so who's the comp? Andre the Giant, okay? To the point where WCW wanted you to think he was his kid. Anyway, the point
And
is,
Andre's a little overrated.
well, the thing with Andre, though, is it's two things with Andre. Andre was bigger, right? So there is even more of a whoa factor. Paul White was a much better professional wrestler than Andre the Giant, a much better athlete. Like, we're going to talk about Goldberg, and one of Goldberg's greatest highlights is jackhammering that guy, and Paul White does a lot of the work.
Young days Andre, though, I'm always told, was like a great athlete.
just wasn't on
When it
TV.
was like
Right.
385, 400,
and it comes-
he could do drop kicks and all that stuff.
And it comes right back to the Flair Dusty thing, where if you go town to town and you see Andre the Giant with your own 2 eyes at the Sportatorium, you cannot believe you've never seen a human being that big. You can't believe it. But Andre wasn't on TV every week. You didn't go to Raw all the time. You didn't go to you know what I mean? So the spectacle and rarity of it was there more with Andre. The Big Show, very, very, very big man. Unfortunately, also a jobber most of his
Yeah.
career in that company.
They didn't know how to use him.
So
Which is
beating
wild because Vince was doing Andre's bookings.
so beating him wasn't even that big of a deal by the end of
They
it.
beat him his first night in, like Stunner to Austin the week before WrestleMania 15, and you've beaten the Big Show.
But let's talk about Goldberg.
Just
Yeah, please go.
and a quick thing on Shane McMahon.
Yeah.
The reason why I say Shane McMahon overstayed his welcome was because his last 2 appearances, one he blows out his quad, which isn't necessarily his fault, but the one before that where in St. Louis he's trying to book himself to win the Royal Rumble match.
Right.
Like, that blows my mind.
It's like Shane McMahon. Like,
That he comes in and he's like, yeah, Raw Underground, like, it was a great idea, and they used it for the one-off match in NXT, but, like, it didn't really work. But here I am, book me to win the Royal Rumble. And Brock Lesnar's reaction to throwing him and Matt Riddle out of the ring was just an exclamation point on, like, what Brock Lesnar thought of Shane McMahon just coming in here and be like, yep, I'm going to win the Rumble. Nobody will see that coming. It's like, no, there goes the money.
illogical. And unfortunately, I popped hard for Shane McMahon's return, and unfortunately, it ultimately sort of fell flat. We never got the lockbox.
lockbox.
He lost to the
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The 32.
Like the lockbox, he lost to the Undertaker. The lockbox was just never ever pursued ever again after that loss. And
No,
then-
he released it in real life.
well, yeah, now we know.
Bunch of people.
Yeah, we found out. You're
That's
right.
really what happened.
Shane-
when he's like, I'm not getting the company. You know what? I'm going to give this to real legal people.
Shane-
and the
right.
New York Times
I-
and so many other people.
I like to think in kayfabe, Shane McMahon respected the stipulation of the match for a couple years. He's like, damn, I can't reveal the lockbox. And then you're right. He's like, I'm out of here. Never mind.
As soon as I
Wait a
blew up
minute,
my
he
quad,
sex trafficked a woman.
as soon as I blew up my quad, you know what? That lockbox, that's going to be left on the New York Times desk.
But you know what?
Silly
Let's
York guy.
let's talk about Goldberg, because Bill
Yeah.
Goldberg is my personal favorite wrestler.
I know.
He is like, I consider him somebody that, like, I know personally. He invited us to his Hall of Fame
amazing.
ceremony. Just like he knows what he means to me and what he meant to me growing up. He gets it and he cares about it. I will always be a Bill Goldberg fan forever. But there's no doubt that what should have ended was WrestleMania in Orlando, 33. You're 33.
Yep.
And it's multifold. So just here's a little inside pool as somebody who's talked to Goldberg about this. Goldberg was scheduled to come back to promote the video game that he was going to be the cover guy on, lose to Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series, fade and get his Hall of Fame ceremony. He got there, and Heyman and Lesnar were the guys that came and said, hey, we can get multiple matches out of this. Why don't we even have you just squash Brock so we don't expose you for anything, catch everybody off guard, and do it again? WWE was on board. He gained so much momentum, it was able to be for a championship level. He beat Kevin Owens whether you like it or not, because
didn't
Lesnar
like it.
because Lesnar and Goldberg was more sellable and the better match than Jericho and Owens.
Well, that's layered too.
But that match wouldn't have been better if they was for a championship. They should have been trying their best no matter what.
It would have
true.
been.
They should have been trying their best
You're
no
not
matter
wrong.
what.
You're not wrong.
Well, you would have been better if the belt was on the line. No. This is WrestleMania. Do your best.
The story though had been building, and y'all are big on storytelling, right? The fellowship of friendship, all that was building towards not the second match on the show for the U.S. title, but for, probably on that show, Taker, Roman. Sadly, Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton wasn't what we all thought it was.
No.
Brock,
That was the maggots on the ring.
Yes,
Yes.
it sure was.
Yep.
That somehow Orton could see.
But your big matches, Jericho and Owens, for what they were doing and what they were building, should have been a bottom 3 match on that show, a main event match on that show. And it should not have been the second match for the U.S. title.
But then, just to be fair, though, yeah, it did. They stunk. And if you're telling me, and I'm not saying you, but if Jericho and Owens are going to try to convince me they would have had a better match later on in the card, what a terrible... This is WrestleMania.
They would have had more time.
This is Owens' first Mania. You've got a lot to prove. You're already not Vince McMahon's cup of tea, body-wise. You got a lot to prove. You're Chris Jericho. You're the point guard here.
Sure.
And if, again, I don't give a career veteran, and Kevin Owens, who's also a veteran presence, there's no reason why, even if they're pissed, like what you should have done was said, hey, we're on second, we're going to prove them wrong. And they proved them right. They proved him right.
Yeah.
If that was for the Universal title, that went on second to last. Stinker. Goldberg and Lesnar were better. And because I'm such a Goldberg guy, here's what happened, just as in a nutshell of it. Goldberg came back. Even the promo was perfect.
Yeah.
Brock Lesnar, you're last,
Yeah.
right? And he should have lost to Brock and gone away. And then what happened that very same night, WrestleMania 33, was that Goldberg looked good as an older, legendary return guy, and The Undertaker looked as bad as he could have as a return legendary guy. That night, the WWE had to decide that if we're going to have a return special occasion match, if it's not Triple H, which is he's phasing into something else, I guess it's
His heart won't
Goldberg.
let him.
The Rock isn't.
at
We
this
can't
point.
can't afford The Rock. It's not going to be Steve Austin. Undertaker can't do it anymore.
Triple H
Shawn's
is having
done.
30-minute matches that are just way too long with Seth Rollins and Roman the year before.
And how many times is the executive guy going to be on the card? You know what I mean? Because that's what he was at
Yeah,
WrestleMania
that's right.
33. He was the champion executive, right? That how many? There's just not much juice left in those squeezes. And so with Goldberg, it literally just became. This is a part of WWE. The Undertaker's been doing it for 10 years, but when we need somebody, Shawn can't do it, Rock can't do it, Taker can't do it. It's you. You're the
it.
legend
But the
guy.
reality of that whole buildup was Goldberg really couldn't do it because he was trying to cover up injuries.
And
that
50.
he had- the age thing is part of it, but Goldberg was injured going into, I think, everything. And that's him training a certain way. That's just being 50. And so, like, if Goldberg's last match was 33 against Brock, perfect ending. But, I mean, I honestly, if I'm Bill Goldberg and I get offered stupid money to, spend 72 hours in Saudi Arabia, to and from, this one-off match with McIntyre, this one-off match here, losing to Braun Strowman, things like that.
Squashing Dolph Ziggler.
Right? But, like, I'm not going to say no to that. The
Right,
thing that I
right.
might have said no to was if I had COVID and I'm getting in the ring with Roman Reigns, who has all these health issues, I'm sorry, like, people's health is more important than
course it is.
the $10 million that the Saudi prince is giving me.
Of course it is.
And I'm sorry, but, like, you have to wait on your match with Roman. I know it was delayed because of the pandemic, but, like, you got to delay it again. And that's where he should have said no. And he got porked over because Vince never gave him his actual farewell match, and he lied to him. But
And the thing with WWE too, with
the idea is that Goldberg overstaying his welcome is not his fault.
and Goldberg also, like, what WWE fell in love with was like the on paper Goldberg stuff, right? Goldberg does the spear, and so does Roman Reigns. Let's have the spear guys wrestle when they both need certain opponents, and Goldberg just it's done. Like we talked about this off the air, but this is my last point on Goldberg, right? Because I agree with you that
It's not his fault.
Goldberg had a very rare opportunity to Elway this thing where he spent his whole career being told he can't wrestle. His best match was Lesnar at 33. That was his best match of his career.
I agree with that.
And he couldn't just Elway the thing and leave. But with Goldberg, you're right. It's tough to say no to the money. Yeah. He probably really believed in his heart and soul he could do it every single individual time.
Because he's an athlete. He's a real athlete.
He is, and he took pride in it. But like we talked about this off the air, the problem with Bill Goldberg is when you look at the highlights of who Goldberg was, the best of Goldberg, it is giving the jackhammer to the Big Show. It is doing that amazing gorilla slam, land on your shoulder. Like, it's strength. Because Goldberg in 1998 was 31 years old and strong as, like, freakishly strong. And that doesn't age well. And when you're not freakishly strong anymore, then there's nothing left.
Your three.
I'm going to name 3 people. Then we're going to get to what we're excited about. We're not going to do the card.
We're already in an hour.
We're in overtime.
Yeah.
No, you're closing in on 2 hours.
We're all right. Here's my top 3, and I want to focus on one very quickly because of Bill Goldberg. It's a perfect parlay. So my 3 that have greatly overstayed their welcome. Ric Flair, you almost died. You almost died.
Multiple times.
It is time for you to go. That last match was an abomination. I can't believe that you're even thinking about doing it again. Ric Flair, you're not famous anymore. You
also keep appearing in the news in bad ways.
Right. You're now just getting drunk at bars and getting kicked out. Ric Flair, it's over. It's
that
over.
was a wild video.
Yeah, it's over. It's over. It's over. My second pick of wrestlers who have just greatly overstayed their welcome are Hulk Hogan, both politically and the entire TNA run was damaging. Not knowing when to walk away is something that reflects on even the good days. And so Hulk Hogan in TNA was stupid. Hulk Hogan in the fact that he still thinks his close-minded, unpopular opinions are worth stating, and the fact that he still thinks he is Hulk.
A cultural touchstone.
The problem is that people are paying him for those opinions.
You're right.
Oh,
but,
sure.
but the thing is,
he's a politician.
Oh, yeah. They're all carnies and politicians.
At one point, this country had a nasty case of Hulkamania, and we got over it. And the guy I want to focus on really quick before just talking about like what we're excited for SummerSlam is Bret the Hitman Hart, and here's a specific reason. Bret obviously didn't have a chance to overstay his welcome in the ring, right?
Yes.
Because he got kicked in the head by Bill Goldberg, and that was the end of his career, even though he wrestled like two more times after that.
There's also, I think Bret knocked himself out on the figure 4 around the ring post.
Well, Bill Goldberg had been wrestling for about a year, and he made a mistake, and you didn't do your job taking the kick. And here's why I want to bring up Bret Hart, and I'm going to bring up something that might sound a little, ooh, but I'm going to do it. So, Bret Hart, Vince McMahon killed his brother. He was negligent. He cut costs and he hired a rigging company to use improper equipment and was unsafe and is criminally negligible. He paid Martha Hart $8 million. I'll take Ray. He paid Martha Hart $8 million because they messed up that night. Okay? And Bret Hart worked for the WWE again, seems to be okay with Vince McMahon enough to take his money and show up on Raw. And Shawn Michaels humiliates you on TV, humiliates you, knew what was going to happen, put you in your own move, had the bell ring, humiliates you, right? It's a defining moment of your career and the last match you had in that company, if we don't count the stupid street fight,
thing.
right? So
won the U.S. title also over Miz.
That's true.
So Vince McMahon can cut corners and be responsible for your brother's death and keep a show going, right? Making workers wrestle in a match with your brother's blood on the stain on the canvas, okay? Shawn Michaels can hatch a coup and humiliate you, and those two men can be forgiven. Right? They can be forgiven for being responsible for the death of your brother and for being the last thing that happened in a company you busted your ass for. They can be forgiven. I can move on from that. Bill Goldberg, a wrestler who's green, had been working for a year, made a mistake, and kicked you in the side of the head accidentally, has apologized over and over and over and over and over again, and you can't get over it. Yeah. So here's what I'm going to ask Bret the Hitman Hart, right? If you got kicked in the head by Mike Thomas, if you got kicked in the head by John Cena, Randy Orton, Vince McMahon, Shawn Michaels, do you forgive him quicker than you forgive a guy named Bill Goldberg?
Yeah, I think.
Do you forgive him quicker than you forgive a guy named Bill Goldberg, who you can't so you can't seem to get over this? You can't seem to get over Bill Goldberg making a mistake, because let me tell you something, brother. If a man apologizes to you and means it and has apologized to you for 20 years and you can't accept a heartfelt apology for a mistake, you're less of a man. Not Bill Goldberg, who you also, every time you mention him, make sure you use his full name, Bill Goldberg, and you can't seem to forgive him. Shawn Michaels is off the hook. Vince McMahon is off the hook. Bill Goldberg, wink, wink, seems to be an unforgivable sinner. And I'm wondering if Mike Mizanin or John Cena or Drew McIntyre would be as unforgivable as Bill Goldberg.
I bet you Maxwell Jacob Friedman
Yeah.
would.
Well, I bet you that he might not be able to kick Bret Hart in the head and get away with it either, is what I'm telling you. And that I have thought about this for a long time.
You know what? I haven't thought about that. I don't like Bret Hart. I think that Bret Hart has overstayed.
But you get
his
what I'm
welcome.
saying?
I do get what you're saying.
Who he can forgive and who
Yes.
he seemed to not be able to. Do
Yeah,
you
the
get
born-again Christian?
Yeah. Do you
and
get-
not the Jewish guy?
Yeah. Do you get
Yeah.
where I'm putting down that
Like,
Bill Goldberg seems to have a real tough time here?
Bret Hart also has this weird thing. Maybe he did get kicked in the head so hard that he thought he was going to pick up right where he left off from the WWF.
Right.
And because that was a career-ending injury, he just can't. He can't get over what could have been.
He was at the finish line
I
of a
know.
company he hated being at.
Yes. Oh, I know.
You know?
Yeah. I never thought of that, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot because, again, if Goldberg had, in interviews and stuff was like, screw you, Brett, didn't mean to, I don't care. He
Yeah.
apologizes profusely. And again, I just can't imagine
Yeah,
how Vince McMahon can get off the hook and Shawn Michaels can get off the hook and Bill Goldberg can't.
Yeah.
It's always been interesting to me.
Interesting. That's an interesting poet,
Yeah.
and we can't unpack it here.
And he's just a grumpy old grump
He is.
who
I don't
won't
like
let
him.
go of anything. Jimmy, what are you most excited for SummerSlam 2024?